session of the conference, we are having as our dear guest here Cornelia Perle, which is coming from Division for Election Participatory Democracy of the Council of Europe. And since Council of Europe has started, or maybe I should let you do this, but what I know is that at some point in October last year, we were looking at the Director for Democracy of Council of Europe, because we know that there is such a structure as one of the main pillars of the Council of Europe. And we saw that there was a change, something which was named, what, election? And what was the name before?
First it was election, then it was election and civil society, and
now it's election and participatory democracy. So we saw this key word for us, and that's how we got in touch with them, and finally that's how we came to Cornelia, and she came to us, and now I'm letting her to present what Council of Europe is actually doing within this field. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much also for having patience. It's the final session, so I don't know if I should be honored or if it's a challenge to keep you still with energy. But anyway, so thanks a lot for the organizers, Gazella and Irena, to invite me to this event. I was just talking also yesterday to Roger, and I was saying actually I am rather, to take his metaphor, I'm rather coming from the group of foxes. If you remember, he yesterday referred experts who are dipping deep into the topic, and then you have the group of foxes. So I rather feel in this group like a fox who is looking around, what is out there, what is new. We are not really experts in the topic, but we are looking for experts to working with. And so for me, it's really it was extremely interesting yesterday and before yesterday and today in the morning to hear the discussions. I got a lot of input and a lot of food for thoughts for our work in the field of participatory democracy. And I'm very lucky, Gazella, that you found the keyword, because indeed it is a change. It was a restructuration within Council of Europe. Council of Europe has a long-standing work in the field of civil participation, which is a very huge terminology, which comprises everything and nothing, to say it like this. And I think it was really a very important step for us to redefine our work under the terminology of participatory democracy. As I said, Council of Europe has a long-standing experience in working in civil participation, above all in standard setting. We are kind of the new kid on the block when it comes to practical and systematical work, and this is why I'm very glad now to also get a little bit in the network of you, of the experts, international experts, to hear about what is going on. I discussed a little bit with Gazella also. Maybe you know, all of you know what is Council of Europe, but the Council of Europe struggles, I often make the joke, struggles a little bit like Austria with getting mixed up with Australia, and Costa Rica getting mixed up with Puerto Rico. So, and Council of Europe often gets also confused with European Union, European Council, etc. But Council of Europe, it's the international organization, human rights, a leading human rights organization based on the European Convention on Human Rights. We do have 46 member states, not the 27 of the European Union. It's 46 member states. We had 47 member states until recently. Russia was one of the member states, and due to the war situation in Ukraine, that led to the how can I say, that Russia is not any longer a member of Council of Europe. And I think it's also very important to mention that the Council of Europe really has these 46 member states, including many states within Europe which first are members of Council of Europe and then eventually at a later stage also try and become members of European Union. So it has never been the other way around, that a state was member of Council of the European Union and then the Council of Europe. The core idea, the core values is to promote democracy, to protect human rights, and to protect the rule of law. So these are the three main pillars of our organization. How do we do that? Through monitoring the implementation of the Convention, the European Convention of Human Rights, through standard setting in this field, and through the practical cooperation and support to cooperation work with member states and support to member states. Important bodies of our organizations, and the most well-known probably is the European Court of Human Rights. You know, maybe the famous cases, Madame Sabine Müller against the government of Germany, or Monsieur Giovanni against the government of Italy. So these are the cases come when citizens of Council of Europe member states feel that their human rights are violated by their governments, so they can bring the case to the European Court of Human Rights. The Committee of Ministers, the Parliamentary Assembly, the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities, the Conference of International NGOs, and the Commissioner of Human Rights are other important bodies of Council of Europe. And I recall, I think it was Giovanni who told us yesterday or before yesterday about one of the outcomes of the Conference of Future of Europe, where one of the recommendations was the renaming of the bodies of the European Union, so to make it better understandable actually what is each body doing at what level. And I think I will bring back this recommendation also to Council of Europe. When I listed it like that, I thought probably for outsiders it might be similar, confusing, or not very clear. So what is, who is doing what within Council of Europe? But I will not go into detail in this now. I just wanted to give you a short insight overview what Council of Europe is, how is it structured, and what are we doing beside participatory democracy. So when it comes, as I said, to civil participation, which was the terminology which is still very important and which was also until recently our main terminology, when it comes to civil participation, Council of Europe is supporting Council of Europe member states within three important areas of work. One is the protection of civil society. That means to make sure that citizens are really safe to raise their voice, to participate in political decision making, to be really safe and to be protected. This is a very important work in terms of freedom of association, freedom of speech, a very important work when it comes to the protection of human rights defenders. So it is the work about protecting civil society for safe participation in political decision making. As I said before, European Court of Human Rights plays here a very important role, and the function of the Commissioner of Human Rights is here the leading figure also to monitor the implementation of this value. Another very important work Council of Europe doing is in this regard is the development of civil society. And I was thinking actually this morning we were talking very much about social movements, participation of social movements. So I think many of the points that were raised today in the morning and partly also yesterday, they fall under our work area, which we call the development of civil society, the strengthening civil society organizations, giving them voice, helping them to get organized, helping them to get strong and visible. This is very much a work which we are doing within empowerment of marginalized groups, women, youth, minorities. There are huge programs to empower, to strengthen participation of these specific groups. One of our, let's say, flagship events in this regard is the World Forum for Democracy, which take place annually in Strasbourg, and where civil society organizations are invited to exchange with governments, exchange with other organizations about new trends, about challenges in this regard. And of course, one of the leading organizations also within our Council of Europe, is the Conference of INGOs, which is the space within Council of Europe where NGOs, civil societies are represented. And then when it comes to the third field, the third area, and this is the area where our work, where my work is embedded, this is the engagement of civil society. We call it also the engineering of the participation mechanism. And this is the whole package of participatory democracy that we are at the moment developing within our division to enhance participatory culture and practice, to develop new tools and mechanisms, and to set international standards for participation. And as we said previously, so it was everything, all of this work was somehow included in this big terminology, civil participation, and recently now we really limited us to the participatory democracy terminology. So what do we do in this regard, in this area of participatory democracy? We have two main areas. So one is the cooperation work, the technical, practical support to Council of Europe member states. I just mentioned the main countries we are currently supporting. This is Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, Bosnia-Herzegovina. I put Serbia because we look forward also to a more active then cooperation with Serbia, Albania, and Morocco. And we are mainly, Council of Europe is mainly working normally with governments, with local governments, public, national governments, with public institutions. But in this particular field of participatory democracy, we really try to have a balanced cooperation with civil society organizations and public institution and government, because the thinking, and I mean it's the logic of participatory democracy, is to have both sides on board, and you cannot work with one and excluding the other when you want to have a real credible work within participatory democracy. The other area where Council of Europe is working within this field is the standard setting. So the Committee of Ministers has adopted already in 2001, I think, the first recommendation on civil participation or participation of citizens in public life. It has been revised in 2017. There are guidelines for civil participation. There is a code of good practice on civil participation. So in this regard, Council of Europe has long-standing experience to recommend to their member states, to the governments of their member states, how to implement, how to follow, which standards to follow when it comes to civil participation. So what are we doing in the field of cooperation? As I said already, we support public authorities and civil society organizations in different areas, but I think you can summarize it mainly in awareness raising activities to create a culture, a joint culture for participation, because you can have very willingly authorities to introduce tools, consultation platforms, etc., if you don't have citizens who really believe in the benefit of using these instruments. So awareness raising is a very strong element of our support. Then, of course, skills and capacity building for practitioners from both sides, from the local authorities, from the municipalities, governments, whoever needs to implement these tools, and also for civil society organizations. And what is very important for us, we very much strive to give expert technical support to the really practical, direct implementation of the tools. So, of course, we do capacity building, we do awareness raising, but what interests us very much, or almost most, is really to support individual municipalities or individual institutions to really implement the tool. So we provide support to accompany whoever requests it, and if it is within a project or within our plan, from 0 to 100 to really implement a tool to make sure that there is also really a tangible result that citizens can have a benefit of. So it's not about capacity building, it's about really improving the service delivery. It's not about skill development, it's really about having a participatory developed gender policy. So the product is what we are really, the result is what we are very interested in to support. But of course, the result can only be reached if you first do the awareness raising and the capacity building. And what Gazella was saying previously, so since last year when this structural change happened, since then we are building up a center, we call it the Center of Expertise, maybe it's a big word yet, but this is at least what we are aiming for. Similar as the Center of Expertise for Good Governance, which is an officially mandated body from within Council of Europe. So now we are trying to build up a Center of Expertise for Participatory Democracy. We have started last year. And so let's say the main work of this center at the moment are the 2 cooperation projects in Georgia and in Ukraine. We have implemented 15 academies of participatory democracy in 4 countries, and Serbia will be now the 5th one. We will having starting tonight, and then tomorrow, after tomorrow, we will have the first academy on participatory democracy in Serbia. And through these academies, which are just very general awareness building and teasing activities, as we call it, it's like the teaser to really raise the interest of practitioners, of responsible people in the field. So with this kind of activity, until now we have reached more or less within 1 year about 500 representatives from local authorities and civil society organizations, and there now we are working to multiply the learned and the effect, and as I said, to try them to really implement tools and mechanisms. We have organized 1 winter school training cycle for 5 countries, and we had just closed this training cycle 2 weeks ago with a big event in Tirana. And out of this winter school training cycle, we have now 23 officially graduated European experts on participatory democracy. And 2 of them, by the way, will be coming tonight and be trainers then for the academy here in Serbia also. These are just some photos, how we work. I mean, it looks like every workshop from a university or an NGO, but so it's really hands-on and very practical. Some of our tools, I think I don't want to go too much into the tools because you are the experts, and we don't have any additional tools that you probably already know. And I know that many tools are similar one to the other, depending who did develop it. But let's say our flagship tools that we are promoting, that we are supporting to be implemented in the countries, it is the Civic Lab Methodology, which is a consultation tool, which has a digital, an educational, and a face-to-face component. It is a consultation tool that is used by partners to develop strategies, to develop policies, to develop annual plans in a participatory way. So that has been applied by the Ministry of Youth, for example, in Ukraine. It has applied by municipalities. It has been applied by NGOs. So it's who wants to develop something in a participatory way with a bigger group can use and apply this tool. Then we have the U-Change game, which is a board game that you can play with students, but also with adults. It's an educational game as an for citizens to learn where are the entry points for them to participate in decision making. We have a methodology on school participatory budgeting, which is also online and offline tool, and which is not only a tool, it is a methodology, a process that lasts at least 6 to 8 months, which starts with really changing and adjusting, for example, the legal framework of the respective municipality who wants to implement it, to revise the budgeting, where does the revenue come from, until then really work with students and professors, and then really also implement and construct whatever is the result of the participatory process. Then I also added these two examples of citizen assemblies and participatory budgeting. These are not tools of Council of Europe, and there are other organizations who have been pioneering in developing these methodologies. I just want to mention it that we are, for example, in such cases when we have a request and interest of a municipality to organize a citizen assembly, so we support them by bringing expert support. And in this case, for example, in Georgia, we are working together with the Center for Blue Democracy, which is a Polish organization, and so we are supporting in Georgia with bringing expertise from the Center for Blue Democracy to organize a citizen assembly, in this case in Rustavi and Osurgeti. And the same with participatory budgeting. It's also not something that we will not reinvent the wheel, but we are rather working with organizations together and providing then the municipalities or the regions who want to implement it, the contacts and the means, the resources to implement it. So just some other photos. This is training from the Civic Lab and U-Change training, for example, now in Tbilisi. That was still the face-to-face module, which then was followed also by 3 online sessions, and ended then with the graduated trainers on these methodologies of Civic Lab and U-Change. As I said already, in the field of standard setting, Council of Europe has a long-standing experience. Just the recent, let's say the recent and the actual ones are the guidelines for civil participation in local decision-making, which were adopted in 2017, the recommendation on participation of citizens in local public life, 2018, and the Code of Good Practice for civil participation in the decision-making process. I mean, these are documents which Council of Europe has adopted for their governments, member states, and it is, these are very general guidelines and recommendations how to implement, what to respect, what aspects to take into account when implementing civil participation initiatives. And I remember one of the last questions of the last panel was also about the relation between these new developments within the deliberative democracy, taking more civil citizens on board, direct individual citizens on board in these processes, versus working with NGOs. In the participation project, I think there was the question if this creates tensions, what is the relation here, citizen assemblies, NGOs, individual citizens. And I think this is something, if you go through these documents, you will see Council of Europe also was in a development process and grew with the process and the thinking and the learning. And in the documents, it's still quite mixed up. Citizens engagement, NGO engagement, it's kind of everything together, and it's not very sharp in some aspects. And I think that is one of, also for us, one of the current important discussion and questions, how to really sharpen that, to give guidance and recommendations to our member states to really implement participatory democracy properly, efficient, but really taking into account or individual citizens or NGOs, because it's two different dynamics, it's two different thoughts and paths. Both are same equally important, but it's a different approach for member states. I just wanted to give you some outlook on our plans. I will go through very quickly. We just plan to support in Herzegovina, for example, the youth councils with implementing and applying, let's say, the civil participation toolkit. We also plan, and here I'm looking at Gazella, has to be confirmed, a winter school for Balkans, Western Balkans. I put it in Bosnia-Herzegovina, but so it's more general. For Moldova, we are discussing projects on participation, also very directly targeting now at the moment the situation that Moldova is receiving a lot of refugees from Ukraine, which creates a lot of challenges for population in Moldova, municipalities, communities in Moldova, and there are ideas also how to use participatory tools in this context. We also plan to have another academy for participation in Chisinau soon. Ukraine was actually one of our flagship projects. I think it was the country where we started first with the work on participation 5 years ago. Of course, due to the situation at the moment, we had to stop for a couple of months, but now in May, implementation of the project started again. And we are very pleased also to say that, that our experts, our partners in Ukraine, they made a request to adjust the Civic Lab methodology, for example. They had ideas how to adjust this specific methodology in this new wartime situation to resolve, for example, problems with these. You might know that in Ukraine many volunteer groups raised now during this emergency situation, informal groups, informal initiatives, so there is a lot of need to organize this kind of participation, and so there is an idea to adjust the tools for this new situation. In Georgia, now the colleague from Georgia, she left already, but so there are also planned the application of the civil participation toolkit and the Civic Lab in 4 municipalities. They are planning to adapt the U-Change board game to the Georgian context, because the U-Change board game, of course, you need to adjust to each country according to the institution, according to the decision-making cycle, according to the budget situation. So it has really to be very adjusted to the situation. So they are currently working on adjusting it for the Georgian context, and they want to distribute it broadly in public libraries in the country to have it accessible for citizens or for teachers, educators, whoever wants to use it there. And we are currently planning 2 citizen assemblies, supporting the organization of 2 citizen assemblies in Osorgeti and in Rustavi. In Albania, we are currently supporting the city of Tirana with the development of the strategic plan, 5-year plan, applying the civil participation toolkit of Council of Europe, and also there's a pilot of school participatory budgeting in 3 municipalities of Albania. Next events, I talked already to some of the experts I got to know here. We will have a conference on election and participatory democracy tentatively in September this year in Strasbourg, and then we will have, as I said already, the World Forum of Democracy, which is a very general forum, so it's not only from our division, but during the World Forum of Democracy, our division, our program, we will also have one slot where we would like to organize a mock citizen assembly on deliberative democracy, and it will be in November in Strasbourg, and we will share also the information, of course, with you. And so I guess this would be a space that could be of interest also for some of you. And for next year, we plan to have an annual meeting for alumni and experts on participatory democracy in Strasbourg, but that still needs to be defined. Next, publications. I called it publication, so it's not really a publication, but we are currently also developing an online compendium, an online platform, which is called BPART platform, where practitioners from authority side, but also civil society side, can share good practice examples. So it's accessible. You can submit your initiative, your good practice example. It will be checked if it is compliant with the principles of participation established in the Code of Good Practice of Council of Europe. And if it is, and if it is useful information, it will be then put on the homepage. And so I think it should be a really very practical tool for practitioners. So maybe not for you as the experts and academia. It should be really for a mayor, a civil society activist. So how did they resolve this and this problem in other municipalities? Whom can we contact? What are the experiences, etc. And this platform will be launched now end of June, end of May, beginning of June. You can already, I don't know if you enter already the domain name. I think it's still blank, but it will be coming soon. So, as I said, in June it should be online. And we have just recently finalized a report on mapping deliberative democracy in Council of Europe member states. And that I put in November 22, so we have already finalized it, and I brought the copy to Gazella and Irena, because both of you contributed also to the study, and we are very glad for your good contributions. It is an overview study, so if you experts have a look, maybe it won't be to your satisfactions of scientific research, but for us it is an overview study to give just also an overview to non-experts of what is going on, conceptual background, ideas, and also some very practical recommendations for practitioners what to do or not to do when implementing deliberative initiatives. And I'm a little bit shy still to how to put it, because it is an overview study which is still a working paper. And this study is recently discussed by the Committee of Governance and Democracy of Council of Europe. And the aim and the goal is that this study finally will lead to a recommendation of the Committee of Ministers to the Council of Europe member states in the field of deliberative democracy. Because our feeling, as I said previously, the recommendation, the guidelines, the Code of Good Practice on Civil Participation is very general, and it's just, they were just the first steps in this big topic of participation. And our feeling is that it's really needed to have a more specific recommendation and guidelines to the member states when it comes to deliberative democracy, the deliberative tools. And so at the moment we treat this document, we can share it, and you can also find it online on the Council of Europe homepage. It's not nicely layouted yet because it's still a working paper, but it's already in our interest to share it and also to get feedback, but please don't take it as the written in stone document. So it's a working paper. And I just also wanted to highlight again what are at the moment our main discussions also. Now we feel we have established more or less laid ground on this participatory democracy groundwork. And now for us, as I said, very important discussion now is the development of a Committee of Ministers recommendation on deliberative democracy, and have a better understanding really where we should go in this regard. And I think here I got really also some very useful and important input from the discussions here. And the other one is a very important also discussion, which you touched on several panels also, and that is the relation between election, representative democracy, and participatory democracy. Because, as I said in the beginning, I'm working in the division of election and participatory democracy. I'm responsible for the participatory democracy, and we always say, yeah, we see participatory democracy complementary to elections. Stop. But when we ask ourselves, or when we are asked, and when we start to discuss, so what does that exactly mean in the practical work? So you work with central election commissions, you work with electoral administration, you support here, and you support on participatory initiatives. So, but where are the relations, where are the overlaps, where are the connection points? And that is something that we are now, that will be now really the next challenge, or the next phase for us to work on that and really have a strong conceptual basis which can guide then our practical work with the partners in the field. And I just wanted to add also this, I mentioned it already, but when Giovanni mentioned it today, I thought actually that is also, as I said it, one of the current main discussions, also how to work in practical terms on this question of participation of civil society organizations and participation of citizens. Because, as I said, this is also something we need to have a clear understanding when it comes to the work on the ground, to the practical work, to really be clear about where are here the differences, the overlaps, the synergies, how to handle that. So these are important questions for us. And just a final comment I want to make, and it's really a pity that I am the last speaker here, because my final comment would be, please, I would like to hear your recommendation, what you would like to see to be done from an international organization like Council of Europe. What can be our added value to this work? Where do you see our input, our practical work? So it's a little bit late for this question now, but I am pretty sure that we can share the contact details. And if you have any ideas and feedback on this really recommendation to us, what can we do? Where can we be useful? What should we follow up? Where do we have to stop to further dig? That would be very welcome. So with this, thanks again for your attention. And
Thank you very much.